Filipina phenom Alex Eala is set to face off against the hometown heroine in her first clay court stint as the season as Julia Grabher is expected to be welcomed by a roaring crowd in the Upper Austria Women Linz Open.
The design center in Linz went quiet. Not the polite quiet of a close match, the stunned quiet of a crowd that just watched something they cannot explain. Julia Grabher, Austria's own, playing on her favorite surface in her home country with her home crowd, was falling apart in real time. And the person taking her apart was a 20-year-old Filipina who was not even supposed to be dangerous on clay. Nobody in the mainstream commentary prepared you for this. They fed you the comfortable narrative: local hero, clay specialist, home advantage, atmospheric favorite. Grabher walked in with the flag, the crowd, and a 14-13 WTA clay record built over years on this exact surface. Eala walked in with a 2-4 clay record from 2025 and questions nobody had answered yet. The system had already decided who wins this story, but somewhere between the first and last point in Linz, Grabher completely collapsed, and every expert who quietly wrote Eala off on red dirt just ran out of excuses. A 3-8 record and 5 straight losses coming in, and the crowd still treated Grabher like the inevitable winner. That tells you everything about how this sports establishment actually works. Subscribe now, because the full breakdown of what Eala exposed inside that match is coming up right now, and it is not what anyone is saying publicly. Let's start with Grabher. Because before you understand what happened in Linz, you need to understand exactly who Julia Grabher is supposed to be on clay, and why her collapse in this match is so much more significant than a simple first-round exit. Grabher is 29 years old. She is Austrian. She was born and raised in Dornbirn, a city in Western Austria, and she has spent the better part of a decade building a professional tennis career almost entirely on red dirt. Clay is not just her preferred surface, it is the foundation that her entire professional identity sits on. Her WTA-level clay record stands at 14 wins and 13 losses. That is a winning record at the highest level of the sport on this surface. At the challenger and ITF level below that, her clay numbers are genuinely dominant: 314 wins against 156 losses. That is a 66% win rate across hundreds of matches on the surface she supposedly owns. This is not a player who stumbles onto clay and hopes for the best. This is someone who has dedicated years of her career to mastering every inch of it, and 2025 was supposed to be proof of that mastery. She started that season ranked number 470 in the world, basically starting over from scratch after an injury-interrupted stretch. By the time 2025 ended, she had fought her way back inside the top 100. She won the WTA 125 Florianopolis title on clay in October. She picked up 3 additional ITF clay titles across the season. She recorded 53 clay court match wins across all levels in a single calendar year. 53. That is not a player rebuilding. That is a player on a mission, doing exactly what she has always done best, on exactly the surface she has always owned. So when the draw came out for the 2026 Linz Open and Grabher found herself on home soil, playing in Austria, at a tournament where she received her very first WTA wildcard back in 2019, the narrative wrote itself. The tennis establishment did not even need to think about it. Local hero, clay specialist, home crowd, first-round match against a Filipina with a historically poor clay record. This was supposed to be the comfortable, predictable result that nobody would remember by Wednesday. But here is what the establishment chose to ignore. Grabher arrived in Linz carrying a 3-8 record for the 2026 season. She had lost 5 consecutive matches before stepping onto that court. 5. Her 2 most recent tournament appearances were WTA 125 events in Turkey, the level just below the main tour, and she still could not string results together consistently. A player who dominated clay at 53 wins in a single season just 12 months earlier was now visibly struggling to rediscover any form at any level. The physical tools were still there. The ranking, at number 87, still reflected enough history to command respect. But the momentum, the confidence, and the match sharpness that defines a clay specialist in peak condition, all of it was absent coming into this tournament. The tennis world looked at Grabher's name in the draw and saw the resume. It did not look closely enough at the recent results. That is exactly the kind of lazy analysis that the establishment runs on. Reputation over reality, narrative over numbers. Now look at the other side of the court. Alex Eala walked into Linz carrying her own complicated relationship with this surface. Clay has been the one persistent gap in a career that has otherwise been defined by rapid, dramatic improvement. In 2025, she played 4 clay tournaments and went 2-4 across the season. Her only WTA-level win on clay that entire year came in the first round of the Madrid Open against Victoria Tomova. After that, she ran into Iga Swiatek and the run was over. At the Italian Open, she exited in the first round. At Roland Garros, playing in her Grand Slam debut on clay, she lost in the opening match to Emiliana Arango. The surface has never been kind to her, and nobody in serious tennis commentary pretended otherwise. Entering Linz, Eala was ranked number 46, 16 spots below the career-high number 29 she had reached just weeks earlier in mid-March. That slide came directly from failing to defend the 390 ranking points she earned during her 2025 Miami Open semifinal run, one of the signature results of her entire career. She went to the Miami Open this year, reached the round of 16, absorbed a 6-0, 6-2 loss to Karolina Muchova that was as one-sided as any scoreline she has faced this season, and watched her ranking drop in real time. The context around her Linz appearance was not comfortable. She was a player trying to stop a slide, not build from a peak. What makes this entire situation worth examining is the preparation she brought into Linz despite all of that pressure. Eala did not arrive in Austria, having spent her break recovering passively. She went back to the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, the facility where she has trained since 2018 and where her coach Joan Bosch is based, and she got to work specifically on clay. The academy posted footage of her on indoor red clay, working through extended rallies, adjusting her movement patterns for the slower surface. And then on April 4th, just days before her Linz match, the academy posted a photo that the tennis world noticed immediately. Eala was on court with Iga Swiatek, the 4-time French Open champion and one of the 2 or 3 best clay court players the women's game has ever produced. Bosch had specifically requested that session. He wanted his player to feel the pace, the spin, and the physical demands of elite clay court tennis before the competitive matches began. That is not the preparation of a player who has accepted her limitations on the surface. That is the preparation of a player trying to genuinely close the gap. Eala herself was direct about it in the lead-up to the tournament. She acknowledged clay as the surface with the most room for improvement in her game. She did not hide from the history or make excuses for the 2025 results. She simply stated she wanted to see how the preparation would translate. That level of self-awareness, combined with the kind of deliberate, targeted training she undertook in Mallorca, is precisely what separates players who grow through difficult surfaces from players who simply endure them. The establishment's version of this match was already written before the first point. Grabher on home clay, with experience, reputation, and crowd support, was the atmospheric favorite. Eala was the hardcourt specialist testing the surface, probably good for a competitive match, but ultimately out of her depth. That framing was everywhere in the pre-match coverage, and it was built almost entirely on surface-level reading of both players' histories rather than any serious examination of current form. Because the serious examination of current form told a completely different story. Grabher was a player in freefall. 5 consecutive losses, a 3-8 record, recent exits at a level below the main WTA Tour. Eala was a player with a 14-8 record for the 2026 season, fresh off deep runs at 3 consecutive major tournaments, and a targeted clay court training block under the guidance of one of the sport's best clay coaches. The form gap was real, the preparation gap was real, and Grabher's structural weaknesses were real. A WTA hardcourt record of just 5-21, meaning her game is genuinely built for one surface and struggles to adapt when the conditions change or the opponent applies different pressure than what clay court baseliners typically generate. Eala's power game is built differently from the typical clay court grinder that Grabher handles most comfortably. As a left-handed counterpuncher, Eala generates angles from the backhand side that right-handed players rarely see at this pace. Her forehand carries genuine pace even when she is not attacking. She does not grind rallies into attrition contests. She compresses them. She shortens the exchange before her opponent can find the rhythm that clay court specialists depend on. Against a player like Grabher, whose entire defensive system is calibrated for longer, heavier baseline exchanges, that compression creates a problem that preparation time alone cannot fully solve. This is what the Linz crowd did not understand when they arrived expecting a comfortable home soil result. The match format on paper favored Grabher. The match physics favored Eala. And when those two realities collided inside the design center, only one of them held up. The tennis establishment has built a comfortable habit of waiting for Eala to fail on clay before taking her seriously on the surface. Every hard-court result, no matter how spectacular, beating Swiatek, dismantling Ostapenko twice, reaching the quarterfinals in Dubai, got filed under, but wait until clay. That qualifier followed her into every conversation about her ranking, her ceiling, and her future at the French Open. It was the establishment's insurance policy. No matter what she did on hard or grass, clay remained the footnote they could always point to. What happened in Linz strips that insurance policy away. A player who built an entire career on clay, playing at home in front of her own crowd, at a tournament where she received her first WTA wildcard 7 years ago, could not hold her ground against the pressure Eala brought. That is not a minor result. That is a data point that changes the conversation. Grabher's collapse in this match is not just about one bad day. It reflects the gap between reputation and current reality that the tennis world consistently refuses to acknowledge when the player involved is not from a traditionally powerful tennis nation. The Austrian was given the benefit of every doubt: home soil, clay pedigree, experience advantage, while the Filipina was given every reason to fail. The result in Linz is the sports establishment getting the answer it was not prepared to receive. The clay season is just beginning. Stuttgart is next for Eala, then Madrid, then Roland Garros. Every match from here will be measured against what she has historically failed to do on this surface. But the conversation has now shifted. You cannot keep reaching for the clay footnote after what just happened to one of Austria's most decorated clay specialists in her own backyard. If you want coverage that tracks this story honestly, without the comfortable narratives, without the reputation bias, and without waiting for the establishment to tell you what to think, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the bell so you do not miss a single breakdown as Eala moves deeper into the clay season. The most important matches of her career are coming. We will be here for every one of them.